Okay guys, in the last session we talked about installing our Esxi host. So I installed two Esxi hosts, and let me just show you the configuration. So if you just right click on this Esxi virtual machine, you can see I have given it like two processors, around 12 GB of RAM, and I have assigned like four network adapters to this. So we also saw how can we actually manage. I showed you all the options here on this TCUI console, what are the things you can do. So you are pretty much limited to these options. So you can set your root password, set up your management network. So management network is the one that you'll be using to connect to your Esxi host, or this is the network that the vCenter will use to communicate to your Esxi host and restart the management network. Let's say if you want to, like every time you make any changes, you can restart your management network, or if for some reason your host is not reachable on the management network, so you can simply come and restart the management service. Test management network, so it's going to test everything, the gateway, the DNS, and it's also going to resolve the name from your assigned DNS server, so which in our case is this one, this IP.131. Okay, so without further exploration of DCUI, what I'll do is I'll show you how to manage this host from the GUI. Okay, so you can simply hit your web browser. So this is my first Esxi host, so I'll try to log into my host using my root password. This is my first host, and let's log into other one as well at the same time. So here we are going to explore the options, what are the things we can do from the GUI, and what sort of configuration we can perform from here. So if you see, by default, this is the view you are presented with, and you can see various things about the host that you are trying to browse here. So you see the host name, Esxi1.test.lab, and it's going to show you the version, which version you're running. So it's exactly the same as the ISO which we use for the installation. Okay, so it says state, which is normal. So right now host is like loading normally, no issues or no health issues. And right now it is not being connected or managed by any vCenter because we haven't deployed vCenter yet. So that's why we are seeing this message here, and it's saying uptime because I have just powered this host on just probably some time back, and it says you are currently using Esxi in evaluation mode. So that means your host, because this is a lab, and you can just simply try out your Esxi for 60 days of evaluation. So after 60 days you won't be able to do any new operation on the host, so you will not be able to power on any new VMs. So the existing VMs might keep running, but you won't be able to make any changes, so all the options will eventually grayed out. So it's not a good idea to keep your production host in evaluation, so it's just for the initial period. But in our case, this is the lab, so we have enough time to test out all the features. And if you see here, this option, it says the SSH is enabled on this host. So you should disable SSH unless it is necessary for administrative purpose. So what SSH is, let's say if you want to access the command line of your Esxi host, so you can simply do that using SSH. So that service needs to be enabled. So it is just like a, you can say, compliance warning, because it is only recommended to enable SSH in case you are doing any sort of troubleshooting. Okay, so let me actually show you quickly how you can connect through SSH, and then I'll show you how to enable and disable it through various places. Okay, so let me see. So the software that you need for SSH is PuTTY. Some people call it PuTTY. So I mean, both options, both the names are acceptable. Okay, so what you can do is you can simply try to either put your Esxi fully qualified domain name, which is in my case is Esxi1, which is my host name, .test.lab, which is my domain. So I'll try to connect to this host and see if I'm able to connect. Okay, So it will just give you a security warning because my host is using a self-signed cert. So it will show you like it does not understand or doesn't have any information about this cert. So don't really worry about that. You can simply hit yes on this warning, and now we can again try to log in from root here. So whatever management you do from PuTTY is mostly from the root user. So it will show you root at ESXi1. So here on this console you can run various commands like ESX CLI command. So it will show you various options that you can use. So this one we'll explore later on. So it is just to show you how we can connect our ESXi host using this SSH option. Okay, so I'm simply going to hit exit on this one, and now I'll show you how you can disable this SSH option. So if you come here on your host DCUI, simply press F2, just put your root password. Okay, so under troubleshooting options, there are two things: ESXi shell, which is accessible if you press Alt F1 on the DCUI, and to go back to that yellow screen, just press Alt F7. I'm sorry, Alt F2, my bad. Okay, so now here, if you see, the shell is showing it's disabled. So once I hit enter on this option, it will show it is enabled. Now if I go back to Alt F1, I can see the login console, the login option. It won't show otherwise. If this shell is disabled, you won't see it. Okay, so same applies for SSH. So right now it is enabled, and that's the reason we were able to connect to this host using PuTTY. And now I'll simply disable it. Once I disable this, if I go back to my web browser, you'll see from the host that warning message should be gone. Let me refresh this page. If you see, that warning is gone for the SSH. Okay, so that was one place. Through DCUI you can disable or enable the SSH service, which is also known as secure shell service. And I'll show you one more place from where you can actually disable or enable that service. If you go to manage, if you go to services, these are the various services that you can start and stop. So DCUI, the direct console user interface service, and the one that we need is SSH. So here you can simply start or stop any service, but just make sure whatever service you are starting and stopping, you make sure what is the impact of that service. Okay, so this is nothing, just a service which is used for remote management of your ESXi. So you can disable, enable that every time. So you see there are other services too here. So I'm not going to explain each and every service, but yeah, I will try to explain the most important ones. So you see this NTP service, NTP daemon. So this service is being used for synchronized time for your within your environment with the help of an NTP server. So every enterprise environment has an NTP server, and you can use that to sync time. And time sync is important, first of all, for authentication purposes and also for logging purpose. So whatever logs are being generated, if their time is out of whack, you won't be able to understand like when the logs were generated. So that's why NTP service is important, and you should always keep it running and point to some NTP server. So we'll see that later on, how to point to NTP. Okay, and you have service which is like watchdog service. So it's actually going to monitor your hardware. Currently it is being stopped. So let's see when we join our host to vCenter, and then I'll show you how to start a service from there as well. And I mean, right now you can start it. That's okay. All right. Somehow it's not starting. Maybe it's just because we are running our ESXi into a virtual machine, so that's the reason. But generally this service like starts by default. It's running. Okay. And you'll see other service like VPXA. It's the agent for vCenter. So once we start deploying our vCenter, so this is a service which communicates the host to vCenter. This is being responsible for the communication between the ESXi host and your VMware vCenter server. Okay, and we have service like Active Directory service, so which is being used to talk to the Active Directory server. So let me actually show you how you can join this ESXi host on the domain, and what is actually the benefit of doing that. So if you come here on security and users, So you'll see this option which says authentication. So you can join this ESXi host on the domain. When I say domain, by that I mean our Active Directory services. So this is my Windows server where I have my Active Directory services running. So all my users and groups which I define in Active Directory domain are defined here. So, and I've also installed my DNS services on this machine. So this is 192.168.147.131. All right. So if you see all the entry for the DNS for ESXi 1.test.lab and ESXi 2 are being defined here, and other IPs too. But right now we are just concerned with our ESXi entries here. Okay. So now I minimize this. I come back here. Now to join the domain, you need to know you would be needing your domain administrator password, right? The one which the account which would be having the domain admin privilege. So once I hit join domain, it's going to ask me the name of the domain. So in my case, that is test.lab, and my username is administrator, and I'm not going to tell you my password. Okay, so I'll just hit join domain. So yeah, now you see the Active Directory is enabled. It says yes, domain membership status is okay, and it shows the domain. All right, and here also on my other host, I can do the same. I can simply come to manage security and users, and I will. Okay, this one is already joined, so this one I did prior. So both my hosts are now joined to domain, and now I'll show you what exactly we can do here. I can simply add. This is important. Like once you join this host vCenter, so you can simply assign privilege to all the users and groups from Active Directory. Okay, and you can also create local users on your ESXi host. So whatever you, by default you see in the users, I just see the root user, right, which I've been using to manage everything. So I can use, I can add further users if I want to. If I want to define like another users, let's say one more test user, and just provide some description, which is not mandatory. Just enter the password, and you are done. You can simply add one more test user. Okay, and these are, if you go to the roles page, it's going to show you all the default roles which are there by default. So on host level, you won't see much. When we start managing this host through vCenter, you will see we have more options to create custom roles. So by default, these are the roles which are there by default. So administrator, which self-explains, you have top level rights on the ESXi host, so you can manage each and every aspect of your ESXi host. No access. Again, this is like, for example, when it comes to assigning permissions on your virtual environment, so it totally depends on which object level you assign the permission. For example, if I assign a permission on a virtual machine, so I'm restricting a user or a group to not access or access a virtual machine. So now if I allow the permission on a host level, that means on that host and all its child object, for example, all the virtual machines running on that ESXi host, you won't be able to access those virtual machines. So that's what permissions mean, and these different kind of roles that we bound to a user or a group, and then we allow it on a specific object. So we'll explore that more, and we'll definitely test that once we have vCenter, and that it will make more sense. So by default, you have like read only. So like if I assign a user a read only permission, you'll be able to see and explore the entire inventory. You'll be able to see each and everything, but you won't be able to change or modify anything. All right. So we talk about this lockdown mode. Lockdown mode is nothing, just a secure method. Let's say if you want to restrict users to view the GCUI mode or log in from root user. So I can actually show you what exactly it means. So if you hit, by default it is disabled, but if you hit edit settings, you can simply change the lockdown mode. So there are two modes, which says Strict lockdown, users are restricted to login from vCenter only. That means if your users want to manage the host, they'll be able to only do it from vCenter only. Okay. So I mean, this is kind of tricky situation. Like for example, if I lose my vCenter, I will lose my access altogether to my ESXi host. So I will avoid doing this strict lockdown. Other option is normal lockdown. Users may log in via DCUI, that yellow screen if you remember, and also the vCenter. So yeah, it's a good idea. This option is still a good idea to enable. So if I mean, generally in production we don't use this option. We would prefer other ways. So what we do is in production environment, we keep changing the root passwords for the ESXi host, right? It's like, and those passwords are kept secure. It's not being kept in any sort of notepad and all those things. So we try to maintain a secure portal, and where we stored all the root passwords, and we also generally change those passwords routinely, just to avoid any sort of accidental access. Let's say if somebody got to know the password, so we make sure we change it like frequently, or maybe on a I mean not frequently, but on a defined interval. Okay, so now you see this option certificate. So again, if you remember when we connected SSH session, it gave us a warning about the cert. So this is the self-signed cert information, and it's showing till what time this the self-signed cert is valid here. So you can import a new certificate. I mean, you can get the certificate issued by your internal cert authority. Okay, so you or you can also get certs from a public cert organization. So you have both options. But yeah, in case of production, mostly I've seen for all these internal servers, those are being issued by internal cert authority, unless that application or service is being public facing. In those cases you use public cert, so that your users don't get any errors about unknown certificate or invalid certificate, right? So in those cases we use this public certificate. Now we'll see one more thing, acceptance level. So what is acceptance level? So this option actually shows whatever drivers you are trying to install. So VMware, are they VMware certified drivers or not? So we'll see what all options are there. If you hit edit settings, and you can see one of the good things about VMware is like in most of their consoles or options, they will give you a brief explanation about all the things or all the configuration settings, right? So that's a good thing. So it helps you decide what option you should select or what option you should avoid. I mean, and also it depends on your organizational needs, right? So I mean, I will definitely recommend to put this on partner level. So it's all the drivers which are being issued by VMware itself or VMware partners. So they are being tested by VMware, and they are production ready. So you can go ahead and install those drivers on your VMware on your ESXi host. Now other option is VMware certified. So it says accept only VIBs. VIBs stand for VMware Infra Bundles that are signed and certified by VMware. So we should always stay between these two options. I would say partner, because all the drivers being issued by VMware partners, they are also tested by VMware, and then they are good to install. Community, again, these are coming from the community. Like when you talk about community, like all the people who are supporting VMware, right, and who are using this product over the time, they also provide their inputs, or they contribute towards betterment of product. So the community drivers. So again, I will not recommend that. So it's partner option is the default option, and you should stick to the default one. Okay, so hit save here, and we have seen services section. If you go to the packages tab, it's going to show you like what all drivers are there installed on this ESXi host, all the driver and all the plugins, everything. Every driver has a specific version, right? So you can simply come here and verify the driver version here. So if you see this one, SCSI FNIC, so this is Cisco Virtual Interface FCOE HPA driver. So you can see the version. So this is the best place where you can come and identify. And in future, we'll also see how we can verify this option using command line. And install update, again, you can update, you can specify a URL, but again, in production app, it's not advisable to enable internet access on your ESXi. So it's better to download a driver and then upload it to any local data store on the ESXi or any shared data store, and then you can install any zip file from there. Okay, licensing. So this is again, it's running on evaluation mode. So the beauty of evaluation mode is it's for 60 days. So you get 60 days, enough time of 60 days to actually try out all the features. So it gives you all the features like that is there in Enterprise Plus. So I mean, you can run pretty much everything. So we'll talk about these features. So I'll explain you each and every feature here in the upcoming lessons. So here we are just exploring what are the things we can do from this host GUI, and you'll see further options will be unlocked once we start managing this host from vCenter. Okay, so hardware, it's going to show you all the hardware devices on this server. So right now we are not actually running this ESXi on a physical box, so you'll see a lot of like variations, and you'll see it's been showing some of the devices as virtual. And if you see on the system tab, if you see on the host summary tab, you'll see all this hardware like virtual VMware virtual platform, because right now we're running in a virtual machine. But when you go to a production box, you will definitely see, let's say if you're running this on a Cisco hardware, you will see here a Cisco, and you will see the Cisco server model. It can be a blade server, which can be identified by the naming BL. And if it is a rack server, you'll see, for example, C220. It's again a Cisco rack server model. And then you'll see number of cores, how many number of sockets and cores. Again, you'll see more number of cores because on production boxes you have, because those are enterprise boxes, so they have a very heavy configuration. And again, very large amount of RAM and everything. So now we'll talk a little bit about the networking. So like before we switch to networking, let me also show you other things before we actually get into a detailed discussion on networking. So if you go on monitor tab, you'll see like real-time performance. So I mean, you can simply hit these drop downs and you can see these various charts which will show you like this graph, sort of like sine graph. You can actually see like spikes and what are times we have spikes in CPU or memory. So these stats charts are being used for performance monitoring and any sort of performance troubleshooting. And you have other methods as well, so that we'll explore later on through command line. We have other options too to do a live performance troubleshooting. We'll definitely see that later on. So these are the various charts. You'll see like network utilization, on what specific time you have seen or observed network spikes. And you can also see over the here it will show more of real time. But when you join to vCenter actually stores the logs over the period of time, and you can actually see a historical performance analysis of a specific object. It can be a VM, it can be a host, or it can be a data store, all those things. So you can also see hardware, any sort of hardware or hardware alarms or any sort of issues going on. So if you see this message, the system has no IPMI capabilities because we are running on virtual machine. So once you start running a physical box, you will see physical hardware alarm. So let's say if you have any alarm for a fan, or the fan has failed, or if you see any alarm or any errors on the RAM module, they're going to show up right here. Okay. Events. So this is again all the things which are happening on the ESXi host. So it's going to make a log of each and everything. If you see I disabled SSH, it's been logged here. If you see I logged in through PuTTY, so it's showing all those things. SSH has been enabled, and I have enabled the Active Directory thing. If you see I joined the host to domain, so it says generally what ESXi does is it simply opens the ports whenever that service is being accessed. So if you see the firewall configuration has changed because I enabled or toggled this join domain operation, and it's automatically opened the port for the for the LDAP communication on the ESXi firewall. Okay, so if you see, I created test user. So again, it's just nothing, just information, and it's helpful in case of troubleshooting. If you are seeing any, you just try to track down, backtrack everything which happened on the host, all the events and tasks. Like tasks is generally user generated, like all the options which are being generated by user, they are being logged here, and you can see the logs, all the sort of logs here. So you can see the log from here, and if you remember in the last lesson I showed you how to access the log from the DCUI. So the major log that you'll be concerned with is VM kernel log. That's the one that is being referred the most for any sort of troubleshooting. Let's say any sort of troubleshooting related to network, storage, or any other misconfiguration. And VMK warning, it just logs all the warnings. VM kernel, you can say it's a subset of VM kernel, so it's just extract all the warnings and it just puts in this VMK warning log. So you can come here and check out all the warnings which are showing on the host. VPXA, let's say if you're having some issue why your host is not able to communicate with vCenter, or it's being disconnected. So for all those kind of troubles, you're going to come and look under VPXA log, because VPXA is the service that is being responsible for your ESXi host and your vCenter communication. Alright, now this is the tab which shows you all the virtual machines hosted on this ESXi box. Because right now we don't have vCenter, so we have to go to each and every host individually, and we have to actually see what is happening on that host. But once we have vCenter, we can start managing hosts, and they both show up under the same roof, and the management becomes much easier. And again, having a vCenter makes more sense when you have like a very big environment where you're running like 200 or maybe 500 or maybe 1,000 ESXi hosts, and having a vCenter makes a lot of sense. And besides a centralized administration, you get other features like enabling high availability, vMotion, storage vMotion, and performance charts, detailed performance charts, and all those things. Now if you see on the storage tab right now, under storage you'll see options like data stores. So right now we just have a local data store. So when we install ESXi on this virtual machine, I just gave it like around 20 gigabytes of storage. So somewhere around 7 to 8 GB is being consumed by the ESXi installation, and rest is being formatted as a local VMFS data store. So VMFS stands for virtual machine file system. So this is the place where you're going to store all your virtual machine files. Okay, so networking. So this is the section that we are going to explore next. So but before we do that, I would like to show you some more. Probably we'll cover up networking in the next session. So here I'll just try to show you some more options about virtual machines. What are things or what are operations you can do on your virtual machines. So you can say, you can simply create a new VM. So you can, let's say if you want to deploy a new VM from scratch, this is the place you will come and do, right? So create a new virtual machine. So let's say if I do hit next, it's going to ask me the virtual machine name. Let's say for example I'm installing, let's say, a Windows 7 machine. Now this gives me an option which says compatibility. So it says ESXi 6.7 virtual machines. So what compatibility stands for? So this compatibility is actually every time a VMware version is released, with that specific version, a virtual machine hardware compatibility version is also released, and it actually decides what kind of specs you can give to your machine. So for this you need to actually refer to the VMware configuration maximum. So let me show you that document quickly. You can just look it up on Google. So if you simply search for VMware configuration maximum, that's 6.7. okay, so I'll show you what exactly we mean by this compatibility. Okay, so if you see compute, it says virtual CPU, it says 256. So maximum number of virtual CPUs you can assign to a VM is 256. So right now I'm running 6.7 on this host. So this, if I select this option, I can assign up to 256 virtual CPUs to my VM. And if you see how much memory I can allocate to a virtual machine, it's around 6 terabytes. So this is what compatibility of that virtual machine determines. So if you see 6.5, so again this number is going to be a little less, so I can also show you that one. So that's or maybe on that page if you can see. Okay, let's say 6.5. Now you see this option is way less, like it's like half the limit. So this is the like general trend. Most of the numbers get doubled up, but it's always good to refer to that VMware configuration maximum documents for the specific version that you have deployed, and it helps you out to take the decision. So here in my case I will select 6 or 7, and it's always a good idea to select the latest one. Okay, now guest OS family, let's say in this case I'm installing Windows. So if you see, this is sort of hard coded into this all these drop downs. So all these, this is a good way to find out what OS are being supported by the specific release. If you hit the drop down, you see it supports Linux, Mac OS, Windows. In other, you can have other 64-bit OS, but it's always good to check out documentation if you are using any legacy OS or anything like that. So let's say in Windows, what all things it is are supported. Like if we see Microsoft MS-DOS is being supported, Windows 10, it doesn't have, it does have Windows 7, Windows 95, 98. So I mean, if you see, it has a wide range of Microsoft operating system being supported here, so which is a good sign. So you can simply run any sort of legacy OS here. Okay, so in my case I'll be installing Windows 7. Okay, and I will hit next. I'll not install the OS right now because I don't have enough storage. I'll definitely, what I'll do is once we deploy iSCSI storage on any sort of shared storage, and then we'll be exploring, and we'll be doing a proper full-fledged installation of any operating system. So we'll try out multiple virtual machines, and then I'll show you what options to select. So for now I'm just hitting cancel, and we'll explore the other option once we start configuring the networking, and once we start setting up the iSCSI networks, and we'll configure the iSCSI storage, which is like a shared storage, and that I'll show you how do we do that with the help of a simulator in the next lesson. Thank you for watching.